In the 1990s, Joseph Firmage was one of the pioneers of the early internet. He founded a company called US Web, which at its peak was valued at over $2 billion. After claiming to have been contacted by an extraterrestrial, he became obsessed with the idea of space travel. He squandered his entire fortune chasing this obsession. His mental health declined over the years. Today, Joseph Firmage resides in a Utah prison, where he is serving time for elder abuse. He also faces a lawsuit which alleges that he defrauded investors out of $25 million. He raised this money to develop an anti-gravity propulsion device. In this video, we'll examine the bizarre and tragic tale of Joseph Firmage, the internet entrepreneur whose delusions ended up destroying both his own life and the lives of those around him. Joseph Firmage was born in Salt Lake City, Utah in 1972. At the age of 17, he founded a software company called Sirius, which he later sold for $22 million. In 1995, at the age of 23, he founded US Web, which would be his most successful venture. US Web was an IT consulting firm that helped companies build their own websites as well as other IT services. This was at the height of the dot-com bubble. Every company wanted to hop on the bandwagon and enter the digital economy. Demand for websites was huge. At its peak, US Web was working with over half of the Fortune 500 companies to build websites. In 1997, US Web conducted an IPO. Its stock market valuation peaked at over $2 billion. Joe Firmage was considered one of the pioneers of the early internet. He was featured on a 1998 edition of Forbes magazine, titled Masters of the New Universe. You can see him here on the far right of the portrait. The cover also included Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. In 1999, US Web merged with another company, and the combined entity changed its name to March 1st, Inc. When the dot-com bubble bursted in 2000, demand for websites nosedived. March 1st's revenue collapsed, and they filed for bankruptcy in 2001. But by this point, Joe Firmage was already long gone. He had stepped down as CEO of US Web in 1998, shortly after the company went public. Firmage had long been fascinated by the ideas of extraterrestrial life and space travel. As a kid, he was obsessed with a TV show called Cosmos: A Personal Voyage. Created by Carl Sagan, Cosmos was about outer space and the origins of life. In 1998, he claimed he was contacted by an otherworldly being. Here's a short clip of him explaining the encounter on an Australian television show.
You claim to have had a personal encounter with an otherworldly being. Tell me about that.
I was reading papers which for the first time clearly describe a way to engineer gravity. That's a revolutionary concept. And so one night, after reading one of these papers, I went to sleep, and the next morning I had a rather unusual experience. I refer to it more like a near-death experience than an actual encounter, because the being that I saw in my bedroom was more like an image than a tangible object. But we had a very interesting conversation, and it was quite germane to the subject that I had been studying. I had a conversation with this image, and he said, "Why have you bothered me?" He looked perplexed and bothered. "Why have you bothered me?" And I said, "Because I want to travel in space." And he chuckled and said, "Well, why should you have that opportunity?" And I said, "Because I'm willing to die for it." I've studied the domains of astronomy and physics all my life, and so that's always been a deeply hidden passion of mine, a dream, if you will, and so it was an appropriate response.
After this alien encounter, Firmage became obsessed. He would talk about aliens and space travel incessantly to his colleagues at US Web. They grew concerned about his mental health. The board of directors convinced him to step down from his position as CEO. While US Web eventually went bankrupt, Firmage had already sold many of his shares, giving himself a fortune worth tens of millions of dollars. He devoted his entire fortune to funding his obsession with space travel. He founded the International Space Sciences Organization and the California Institute for Physics and Astrophysics. These two organizations were widely ridiculed by the scientific community. They were not considered to be serious academic institutions. His main goal was to create an anti-gravity propulsion system. This device can levitate by repelling gravitational forces. He planned to use this device to power spaceships and achieve interstellar travel. By the early 2010s, Joseph Firmage had squandered substantially all of his fortune. He moved back to his mom's house and started borrowing money from his dad. If he wanted to continue funding his spacefaring ambitions, he would need new sources of capital, so he started raising money from outside investors. Here's a short clip from a promotional video where he explains the massive economic potential of his research.
My team is cracking 2 major breakthroughs. Gravity-powered engines for moving about in new cars, new planes, new spacecraft, all of them within my lifetime. And starting this year and next, our new test devices will actually break open the whole field of gravity propulsion for everything that moves under power. In parallel to that, the same physics that my team is working on is on the electricity generation that relies only upon a kickstart, only a kickstart of fuel rather than continuously requiring fuel to generate electricity. Those 2 are major breakthroughs that will totally transform and distinguish 21st century life from 20th century life in every single way. Self-powered homes with a use for the grid only to store electricity already generated. No more disposable batteries ever needed. Just self-powering phones. How about phones that can float with gravity accelerometers inside, and cars that can hover and make freeways a hybrid of the past and the future of vehicles that can lift off of your garage.
His main invention was his so-called accelerometer. This is a spherical metal device that spins around. He claimed this was an anti-gravity device which repels gravitational forces. This can be used not only as a form of propulsion, but also as a source of infinite electricity. It goes without saying that everything about this device is nonsense. All it is a motor attached to a metal sphere which rattles around. It does not generate any propulsion or electricity. Here's a promotional video he published in 2017 and showed to prospective investors.
A few years ago, we commenced testing of entirely new means of propulsion and energy. By 2010, after 5 generations of test systems with extraordinary video and data acquired with the finest means and at great cost, we believed a breakthrough was at hand. The implications were profound, and an extraordinary enterprise began. With the mission to make science fiction science fact. Assembling the world's finest experts, the International Academy of Science and Arts was born. Internasa.org. What would it be like to travel to the moon within 5 minutes, safely? To Mars in less than 2 hours? To our nearest star in less than a week? We have the actual data. Internasa's motion physics enterprise has commenced the next stage of testing on its device, which we call VERT 0.9. And it will provide the final perfections on the equations of action for motion physics' first publicly testable thruster to power the new space age. The first acceleromotor, a 12-inch cube adaptable to any craft on land, in sea, air, and space.
He claimed this device can power a spaceship at extraordinary speeds. Specifically, he says that it can reach the nearest star in less than a week. The nearest star is Proxima Centauri, which is 4.2 light years away. To travel there in less than a week, you'd need to travel at more than 200 times the speed of light. Despite the blatant absurdity of his claims, Firmage was able to raise a reported $25 million from investors. Investors and supporters of Firmage include the retired General Wesley Clark, Arizona State University physicist David Hestenes, and David Daniel Marriott, the heir to the Marriott Hotel Company. Many investors look back at Firmage's prior success with US Web. While he might have been eccentric, they thought he was an eccentric genius. They thus suspended their disbelief and invested in his projects, hoping to yield life-changing returns. Firmage often claimed to have won lucrative contracts from the military and other government agencies who wanted to buy his anti-gravity devices. He would tell his investors that he just needed a little bit more money to finish development. This would unlock the massive government money he already had lined up. Of course, these government contracts existed only in Firmage's imagination. As deadlines were missed, he would always have a new excuse. He always needs just a little bit more time and money. He allegedly forged fake letters from the FBI and US State Department, expressing interest in his anti-gravity devices. One of Joseph Firmage's investors was his own father, Edwin Firmage. Over the years, Joseph borrowed millions of dollars from his father, and always came up with excuses as to why he couldn't pay him back. As Edwin aged and his health declined, he came to terms with the fact that his son had squandered almost the entirety of his life savings. In his final years, Edwin wrote the following email to his son. "The depth of your taking millions of dollars from me, in old age and clearly very ill, is beyond my understanding of pure, unadulterated evil." While Joseph Firmage raised millions of dollars from various investors over the years, most of his money either went to paying back old investors or funding his scientific research, which he apparently still believed in. He spent very little on personal consumption. After his father's death, he moved in with his stepmother, Edwin's widow. She was in her 80s and suffered from dementia. The conditions in the house were appalling. Here's an account from a local news outlet. In June of 2023, police were called to the house following a welfare check called by Adult Protective Services. They found Firmage and his stepmother living in the house. His stepmother had lost a substantial amount of weight. Firmage had cancelled her cell phone service and landline. He potentially had two motives. One was to save money. Another was to prevent her from calling her relatives. The stepmother had applied for multiple loans, including attempting to remortgage her house. Of course, it wasn't actually the stepmother who did this. Firmage was using her identity to apply for loans. He used the money to fund his scientific research. There was little food in the kitchen, and water had been shut off due to unpaid bills. When the police talked to Firmage, he became agitated and claimed to have several business ventures, and he was on the verge of receiving a $200 million federal contract. He provided the names of several companies he claimed to own. The companies either did not exist, or their registrations had expired years ago. In August of 2023, Firmage was arrested and charged with elder abuse. He was released on bail while awaiting trial. In November of 2023, while out on bail for his elder abuse charges, Firmage officially launched his presidential campaign. Here's a short clip of him announcing the campaign in a video published on LinkedIn.
My fellow colleagues on the LinkedIn network, it is with great pleasure that this evening of November 8th, 2023, I am formalizing my campaign to become the 47th President of the United States of America. This is a time of great pregnancy and of opportunity and grave risk, I believe, for our nation. I am therefore opening up the search committee for my Vice President and for the Cabinet, each of the 15 Cabinet departments and a 16th department to be in a Firmage administration to come, the Department of Science. While I blind trust my assets, both present and future, properly and ethically, to maintain the standards of business conduct and ethics that I'm well known for and will adhere to without exception, I ask for your tactical support, and let's show the people of the electoral system that the technology industry, that the industries of science, from physics to chemistry to geology to biology, all the way to sociology, anthropology, agriculture, every single discipline we know that encompasses each of the 15, hopefully 16 cabinet departments to be in a Firmage administration will be peopled by people like yourselves. Let's shine a new light on the United States of America. My colleagues, my friends, let's shine a new light for a new century and a new global renaissance to come. And I know it because the ingenuity and the creativity and the just sheer brilliance of the LinkedIn audience is my base. I thank you, my colleagues, my fellow citizens. Please join me. Contribute to JPF for President. And let's get this engine started anew. The new American Renaissance is about to commence.
As of the time of recording this video, Firmage is in a Utah prison serving time for elder abuse. He is also the subject of a civil lawsuit brought by his investors. They claim he raised $25 million to fund his anti-gravity venture. We've covered many fraudsters on this channel before, but what makes Joseph Firmage so noteworthy is his stunning fall from grace. In 1998, he was at the top of the world, literally standing shoulder to shoulder with Jeff Bezos. He had so much potential. Even after US Web went bankrupt, he still had tens of millions of dollars. He could have bought a beachfront mansion and taken an early retirement. He could have had such an easy life. But his delusional obsession with aliens and space travel ultimately drove him to throw away everything. He scammed his own family and friends and now sleeps in prison. He has hit rock bottom. When he says he was visited by aliens in 1998, I don't think he was lying. I don't believe he was actually visited by aliens, but I think that he truly believes that he was visited by aliens. He clearly has severe mental health issues. In my opinion, Firmage truly believed that his anti-gravity device would eventually work. This does not excuse his fraudulent behavior. He forged fake letters from the State Department. He stole his stepmother's identity to fraudulently obtain loans in her name. These are not things that happen by accident. He was sane enough to orchestrate a sophisticated fraud that lasted for more than a decade. But despite stealing so much money, he did not spend it on personal consumption. He did not live a lavish lifestyle by any means. All the money he stole went to his scientific research. Ever since he was a kid watching Carl Sagan's TV show, he has been obsessed with space travel. This is the only thing that matters to him, his only purpose in life. Abandoning this fantasy was not an option. He felt that he had no choice but to continue his research, no matter the cost. While he caused tremendous pain to his family and investors, the biggest victim of this story is Joseph Firmage himself. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. What do you think about Joseph Firmage? Let us know in the comments section below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Wall Street Millennial, signing out.